Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I know that you're busy, you're doing a lot, you're working with a lot of folks, organizations, communities, all over the city and all over the country as well. So thank you for the time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being
No
here.
problem.
Thank you.
No problem. So, and I totally failed to do this in the beginning. You are?
Michelle Gross, and I'm president of Communities United Against Police Brutality.
There you go. Okay, great. And Communities United Against Police Brutality, CUAPB, has been around since
December of 2000, so we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary.
Hey, all right. Well, there you go. Well, congratulations, and we hope there's a CUAPB in every town in the future. There really needs to be. We're here today, and this is January 30th, 2021, to address the proposed charter amendment to the Minneapolis City Charter. First off, let's start off. What is a charter?
Okay, so the city's charter is basically, you could think of it as the constitution for the city. Mm-hmm. It's the thing that kind of outlines who's got what powers, who's got what ability to appoint people, just all the kinds of stuff that's sort of like big picture operational for the city. Mm-hmm. The important thing about the charter, though, is, like I said, because it's like a constitution, it's meant to have a real sense of permanence. It shouldn't be like tinkered with constantly, and it doesn't need to have a ton of detail, but it does need to have enough detail to outline who's got certain powers and authorities and so forth. So it's meant to do that, but again, it's not meant to be changed constantly. It should have a real sense of permanence to it for the most part.
When was the last time it was changed?
Well, there's been periodic changes to the charter over the years, but I think and the big one was that they turned it from a kind of arcane language charter into a plain language charter about 6 years ago or so. But really, in terms of the guts of it, they haven't changed it much at all.
So given that, so recently a charter amendment was proposed from the city council, and you had posted some things critiquing it. So I just want to go through the letter that you sent to city council, and what are the first few things that come to mind when you saw what the charter amendment that they put out? What were the first few things that come to mind that you were like, man, really should have changed that?
Well, one of the first things that came to my mind is, here we go again with another power grab, because this is a power grab. The whole essence of this charter is to move the police from the mayor to the city council. Mm-hmm. And there's some pluses and some minuses of that, but there's some very big minuses. And so first of all, just in terms of the charter language itself, there's like some technical flaws in it, right? We don't have to get into too much detail with that. We've posted about that a little bit. And some of them are kind of pretty technical, but there's a big one. One of the big ones is that they're again, remember that the charter outlines duties and responsibilities, right? And powers. And one of the powers that's outlined in the current charter is that the mayor has the power to discipline police. This proposed charter doesn't give anyone that power. So how would you ever discipline police if you have no one who has that role that has that power? Yeah. So this is like insane to us. Why would you not include that in a charter that you write? It's kind of like basic charter writing 101, charter amendment writing, So they missed that point. There's other little technical details and things like that. But the really big one, the one that counts, is that this charter amendment would take the police, instead of being its own agency that's underneath the mayor, move it to a city agency that reports to a city council committee that reports to a whole city council. Meaning, in other words, that police, law enforcement in the city would move 3 layers down in accountability. And that's such a problem.
So they would create a city council committee.
Say
that one more time?
Okay.
Like even the language for it is a little bit confusing.
All city agencies are either report to the mayor or to a city council committee.
Got it.
The way that our charter is designed.
Yes.
Okay. So most of them report to a committee of the city council.
Yes.
There's a few that report directly to the mayor, and the police department's one of them. What this would do is it would move it under an agency that they're calling the public safety agency or community safety, whatever they're going to call it. It would move it under that agency, under a commissioner of that agency, by the way, so it creates this nice new little job that I'm sure somebody wants.
Yes.
And then that agency would report to a city council committee, which is a grouping of 5 or 6 city council members typically. Yeah. Then that council committee would report to the whole council. So in other words, policing would be 3 layers down. They'd be under 3 layers before, and so in other words, instead of being directly accountable to the community through the mayor, it would be 3 layers down.
Okay.
So it would really reduce the visibility, the transparency, and the accountability of the police department by moving it so far down. It's a huge concern for us.
Why do you think that they made it, they put in an agency, wanted to put in a city council committee and move it 3 layers down?
Because they want to oversee it, but they don't really want to oversee it. You know, they want to assign it to city staff. The other thing that's really goofy about this charter amendment is they don't outline the requirements. They say that they would have to make a division head over the law enforcement, but they don't outline in the proposed charter what the qualifications for that person would be. Now,
Okay.
the way that the Post Board is designed, Post Board is the state licensing agency for all law enforcement officers in the state.
They license all the officers.
Right, and they also make a lot of requirements for what they call the CLEO, or the Chief Law Enforcement Officer
Okay.
of any particular department or agency. They have all of these rules that the CLEO must follow, including like what kinds of training they have to make available, what kinds of records they have to keep.
Yeah.
You know, they have to like have use of force training. They have to, have certain policies in place, like policies about high-speed chases and just all these different. There's like 16 or 17 mandated policies. And the chief law enforcement officer is responsible for having those policies, and they have to mirror closely the model policies and all this stuff. So it's very clear that the chief law enforcement officer has to be somebody that's post-licensed. But this thing that they've written, this charter amendment, doesn't make that clear.
Okay.
And we're not even sure that you can have a law enforcement agency that's headed by non-law enforcement. I don't think that's even possible under post-board rules. You know, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with post-board rules. I sit on the post-board rules committee.
So this amendment could be thrown out just due to that?
I think it could be very problematic. You know, I think it would end up with court challenges for a fact.
Now, you also said that there would need to be a corresponding change to Article 7.2A11, which is missing. What is Article 7.2A11?
Well, all of these things, again, you know, it's part of the charter. They're a little bit complicated, but 7.2A11, you know, under 7.2, there's a list of all agencies that have to be, that, you know, the city has to have.
Yeah.
You know, like it requires the city to have a fire department and a public health department and these, you know, different agencies. And one of the agencies that's required under 7.2A is a police department. So this charter amendment is flawed because it doesn't get rid of that requirement. So what are we going to do? Have a police department and some law enforcement agency under this little hybrid agency? I mean, what are they talking about here, right?
Yeah.
You know, so if you're going to write something, at least learn how to write it correctly.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, these are maybe technical flaws that could be fixed, but again, it doesn't fix the primary problem, and that problem is that you're going to make police a lot less accountable to the community by burying them 3 layers down.
And you also said in the beginning that this is a power grab. What do you mean by power grab, and why are they going through with the power grab?
The city council, there's in our system, under our charter,
Yeah.
we have what's called a weak mayor system. The mayor does not have a lot of power.
Okay.
Most of the power rests with the council.
So in other cities, the mayor has a lot of power.
Yeah, exactly. Or else
Okay.
they don't even have or else the mayor is just another member of the city council, and they're really run by a city manager.
Okay.
We don't have we do have a city manager, but that city manager doesn't have a lot of power, right?
Okay.
Most of the power rests with the city council, and they like it that way, and they want to grab more power. So there's always this constant struggle between the power of the mayor and the power of the city council, and what these folks are trying to do by doing this is to change that balance of power, to take yet another department away from the mayor and put it under the city council, except not just directly, they're going to stick it under one of their agencies.
So this would make the city even, not to like criticize if this was what powers the mayor has and doesn't have, this would make it an even weaker mayor
Yes.
city.
Right. And I'll tell you something else that's important here that
Yeah.
people don't realize. Under our charter, the mayor has responsibility for the police department and ultimate responsibility for discipline of
Yeah.
police.
Yeah.
That the mayor could, traditionally they've elected to delegate that power to the police chief, but they could elect to delegate that power to, say, a group of community members or whatever, right? It enables other kinds of things to be possible. But this charter amendment would take that away. So, in other words, you know, right now as the things exist, the mayor could, if we had a decent mayor, could choose to delegate the authority to discipline police to a group of community members. And wouldn't that be fabulous?
Now,
This would gut that ability.
This would get that ability. So when we talk about community control policing, that wouldn't even be a possibility.
Right, it would,
with
and
this.
that is a possibility.
Okay, and with the after May 25th, just without naming any names, we all know what happened there, May 25th, 2020, and there was essentially the modern day lynching of a black man on Chicago and 38th.
Yes.
And how come there hasn't been that immediate action from the mayor to create some type of immediate community-controlled security or enforcement or policing?
You know, I said this back when Mr. Floyd was killed, that they are going to try to sit on this long enough to put the genie back in the bottle, and they better not try it. I've been saying that they think that they're going to be able to put this genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
And back then I said, you're not going to be able to, and I predicted that. I'm sad that I think my prediction is wrong. Unfortunately, I think they're going to just outlast the community in the level of anger and outrage that the community has, you know, to try to put everything back in the bottle and not make any changes. Because we are like over 8 months past when George Floyd was killed.
Yeah.
We have not seen one substantial change in our city or in our state. You know, they really do think they're going to get away with putting this genie back in the bottle.
Do you believe that this would be a substantial change?
No, absolutely not. This would be the opposite of change.
Okay.
And one of the other reasons I say that is this: the city council has a horrible history of police accountability. They have done next to nothing. In fact, I did a data request and asked them for any kinds of memos or anything where they talked about changes in policing or any kind of police reform or anything. And the typical response is, there's no data, you know, responsive to your request, because they have never done a doggone thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I gotta make that clear. They have done nothing. There is a list, we put out a list of 25 things that they could do right now to do more to hold police accountable, even though they don't even oversee the police. What they do is they control the police department's budget.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of power as a result. They also oversee the agency that is supposed to hold police accountable.
Yeah.
This agency has a record of only disciplining less than half of 1% of complaints that they receive. 0.42% of complaints that they receive.
0. What?
0.42.
So 0.5%.
Not even
Less
half
than
a
0.5%.
percent, right, of complaints. The national average for police oversight bodies is 7 to 8%, and I consider that low. But
So
we're like a
16th of
low-end
that.
outlier. You know, we're doing like, you know, not even half of a percent, you know?
Yeah.
So we are like the ridiculous low-end outlier. The city council oversees that agency. We have been sharing that data with them for 8 years now. Telling them, and that data is not data we made up. This is data from the city that we get from them. So this is their data.
Yeah, yeah.
And we share that with the city council, and every year they look at that data and they shrug their shoulders and they move right along and do nothing about it. And this is one of the things that they could do most immediately. They could withhold funding from the police if they don't pass certain policies. You know, they could, like I said, do something about the Office of Police Conduct Review, which is a damn joke, you know?
Okay. Yeah, and
There's 100 things they could be doing better.
Yeah, and just, I was going to ask you next, so you're saying, like, when we talk about what happened May 25th, 2 weeks after that, the Minneapolis City Council stood on a stage at Powderhorn Park and said, we're going to defund the police. And since then, they said the act was just in spirit, and you're telling me now that they can actually do things without a charter amendment to affect the police. What is one thing they could do right now?
Well, I could tell you one of the things that they could do right now. They could vote, and it would have to be a unanimous vote.
Yeah.
But they could vote unanimously to remove the provision in the city charter that creates a minimum staffing requirement.
Okay.
There is a provision in the city charter that requires us to have enough police officers. You take the population times 0.0017, 0.0017.
Got it.
And that's the required number of police officers. So under the current, population, that runs around, I can't remember the exact number, about 780 or thereabouts, you know. Right now we have 880. So we never even came close to meeting that low threshold, right?
Okay.
So we could do that. We could lower the number of police. And what we could do with the money that we save, because I want you to understand something. A brand new police recruit right out of police training starts at a salary of $68,000 a year in Minneapolis.
Wow.
So, and plus 30-something% benefits, right?
Okay.
And then you have to have squad cars for all these people and all this stuff like that, right? They're very expensive. Policing is expensive.
Yeah.
What we could do is we could get rid of that minimum staffing requirement, and then we could create alternative responders. We need to do this. We need to have a mental health crisis response team
Mm-hmm.
that will go and address mental health crisis. 50% of the people that are killed by police are in the throes of a mental health crisis at the time.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly have seen more than our share of that in Minneapolis.
They also say people that are dealing with untreated mental illness are 16 times more likely to be killed by police.
That's exactly right than any other part of the population. That's exactly right. You know, I think of poor Travis Jordan. I think of all these people, you know?
Yeah.
And we need to stop having cops be the responders. They're not good at it.
Yeah.
They don't do it well. It doesn't serve the interests of the community. We could have people, responding to homelessness. That doesn't. There's a whole host of
Instead
things.
of cops showing up to
Right.
houseless encampments.
There's a whole host of things that don't require a law enforcement lens. Drug overdoses,
Yeah.
wellness checks, just a long variety of things.
Yeah.
That we don't need. We could have alternative responders to those. Take that money back. It's a lot cheaper. One of the things we know right now, for example, is that it costs $429 for a police officer to respond to a call. That's the cost.
What?
$429.
So when police show up to anything, that's $429.
That's correct. That's correct.
Oh my God.
Yeah, people
I'm
don't
sorry,
realize
I never
that.
knew that. I'm sorry.
I know
I'm
people don't
sorry.
know that number. We figured it out.
Okay.
And
Tell me more.
it's a significant figure because we have figured out that to have a mental health crisis response team show up would cost about half that.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's ridiculous. Let's get all that waste out of the police department. Let's get them away from things that we don't need them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Move that money to more appropriate responders.
Yeah.
And then rein in the ones we have left. We'll have a lot less cops. We can rein them the hell in. You know what I mean? We can really rein them in. Hard with real accountability.
Yeah.
If we have less of them, and we can sit on them hard.
Because when I would look at some of the officers, especially some of them that approached George Floyd Square recently, I believe in November, and slammed a black man to the ground, dislocating his shoulder.
Kyle Mayer.
Yeah, Kyle Mayer.
Yeah.
If anybody in their job, like take somebody for example in education, were to do that, not only would they be fired, they wouldn't be allowed to have a job, in that field ever again in that city.
If a parent would do that to a child,
Yeah.
their child would be taken away.
Yeah.
If I did that to you, I would get charged with and prosecuted for assault.
But that doesn't happen to Kyle Mayer or the Minneapolis Police
Certainly
Department.
does. And he will never see a consequence from it because, again, we discipline 0.42% of the complaints that come against the police.
And so coming back to the proposed Charter Amendment 7.3, does this, you've combed through it, just shortly can you answer me, does proposed Charter Amendment 7.3 deal with the minimum staffing requirement for the Minneapolis Police Department?
It doesn't deal with it at all. It doesn't, I don't know, and it's not clear because when you normally write a new statute, charter amendment, or whatever, you have the old one, you strike out the parts that are going to change,
Yeah.
and then you replace them with new language. They didn't do that in this case, so I don't know if it got rid of it or not. I'm worried it didn't, you know? So, I mean.
So it's not clear?
It's not clear. It's
Okay.
not clear.
Does it deal with the Office of Police Conduct Review?
It does not deal with it at all, not
Okay.
in the least, which is like, as problematic as the police is, that agency is equally problematic
Yeah, the OPCR. And
because
you
it
said,
validates bad conduct and lets it continue.
yeah, so to go back, the OPCR disciplines 0.472% of cops. I might have gotten that wrong.
0.42.
0.42 of cops of complaints that are given out.
That's right.
Does the proposed Charter Amendment 7.3 deal with mental health calls or wellness
No,
checks?
it doesn't address any kinds of things where we would bring in alternative responders. It doesn't make any room for that. It doesn't encourage it. It doesn't in any way address it. So again, we're not solving the actual problem. We're just taking police and moving them under other people who still don't know how to solve the problem and sticking it 3 layers down.
Yeah.
I don't see that as a solution.
So to go to the end of the letter that you sent to the City Council, the end of it that takes us into the next segment of this, the reality is there is no magic bullet for solving our city's policing problem. The issues that led to the killing of George Floyd and many others before him have festered long before Derek Chauvin was in a position to place his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck. But we would be much further along if the council would stop bringing forward flawed charter amendments and concentrate on making the changes that actually would make a difference. What are some of those changes that would actually make a difference?
There are several. Like I said, they could vote unanimously to get rid of that minimum funding requirement, and then they could create alternative response mechanisms so that we get cops out of the business of doing things that don't require a law enforcement lens. They could address the Office of Police Conduct Review. They could require police officers to carry their own professional liability insurance, something we've been urging
huge, yeah.
for like 8-9 years now.
And for people that don't know what professional liability insurance is, correct me if I'm wrong. If I have individual liability insurance for when I drive my car.
Right.
Right? So if I get into a crash, I pay for it. What would happen if cops had professional liability insurance?
Well, it'd be a lot like lawyers, doctors, teachers, nurses, all kinds of other people, right? Hairdressers even have it, right? What would happen is that in the way that we put it forward, the city could pay the base rate for the insurance. Any overages caused by that officer's conduct would come out of that officer's pocket, any overages in the premium, giving them a huge incentive not to engage in that conduct and a consequence if they do. Right now, our city budget's $21 million for police misconduct and other misconduct, type claims, right?
So we budget money for
money for police brutality. I want you to think about that, what that means.
So wait, we set aside $21 million a year for police
For
brutality?
police brutality, that's right. We budget, and other liabilities, because sometimes cops get in car wrecks and stuff too, right?
Yeah.
It's not just brutality, it's other misconduct. But we budget money for that. And
who's in charge of that budget?
the city attorney's office.
Okay.
And the financial manager for the city manager. The deal is this: somebody gets hurt by the cops.
Yeah.
They sue because there's never going to be any prosecutions except extremely rare, right?
Yeah.
Derek Chauvin's only the second, and his colleagues are the only second group of people that have ever been prosecuted by Minneapolis police in the history, or by the city, they're the only. Let me say it right. They're the only people of Minneapolis police who have been prosecuted.
Yeah.
After Noor. Noor was the first, and they are the second. Nobody else gets prosecuted for killing members of the community. Okay, it just doesn't happen. Or even harming them most of the time. There's been a few of those prosecutions, but rare.
Yeah.
So you've got the cops that don't get prosecuted, they don't get disciplined, and we can pay out millions and millions. So the only people that really, really pay for police misconduct are the victims themselves and the taxpayers. That's it. So what professional liability insurance would do is it would bring in the risk element. I'm not in love with insurance companies, okay? Let's be real.
Yeah.
Nobody loves them. But they do bring in a concept of risk management. Like, in other words, like, they don't want, if you're a crappy driver, they get rid of you. They don't keep you anymore.
You're done.
Bad drivers don't get to keep their licenses, right? Their insurance, right?
Yeah.
And then that might hurt their license. Well, it's the same story with police. If you keep causing that insurer to have to keep paying out claims for you over and over again, at a point they're going to say, you know what, you're uninsurable. Or your insurance is going to be so expensive you won't want to keep working.
Exactly.
And that would be a way that, the city has no willpower now to fire cops or to give them any real disciplines.
Why don't they have any willpower to do that?
They just don't, because the police union endorses candidates, and there's just no willpower here, right? We don't have political will, and also because, frankly, you have to think about it a little bit. But police brutality and misconduct actually is functional for some parts of our society.
Why?
It's functional because it basically allows rich people to use the cops as their private army to keep the rest of us down.
When we were talking about that, we were doing a march out at Triangle Park in Uptown, and I told everybody, I said I want everybody to understand what a city looks like without policing, and everybody was like kind of confused, and I was like, because look at right here, this is what it is. There's no cops floating around here. Nobody's. We just did a protest today over in the north side of Minneapolis. I mean, there's a squad car that passed by just off a general principle, like at least half a dozen times. And it could have been because there was an action there, but I did not see many, when I'm just around South Uptown, not a lot.
No.
You're around Kenwood? Never, really.
Well, I'm telling you, because I live in North Minneapolis. It is functional for some people to keep other people down.
So police brutality is functional to maintain classism in a city.
That's right, and to maintain, a certain
to protect
social
wealth.
Status, social order. Yeah.
You could even go further and say, it's there to protect, white communities and
Well, affluent white communities.
Yeah.
It certainly doesn't do anything to protect, white homeless folk or whatever,
Exactly. So
yeah.
Police brutality is functioning as a means to make a certain part of the city feel safe.
That's what I believe. Yes.
So I don't want to be too harsh on the proposed Charter Amendment 7.3. Are there any things in here that you're like, okay, cool?
No.
Why not? I mean,
because again, the premise of it is to move the police 3 layers down.
Yeah.
And that is what I find the most absolutely disturbing.
And some people have told me that they've said, hey, this is going to change the police force.
It isn't going to change them. Where is the change? I see nothing in there to make them more accountable.
Yeah.
I see nothing in them there to move things away from policing that don't need to be handled by the police.
Yeah.
I see nothing that really changes anything except who's the boss. And even in that case, they didn't do a very good job of outlining who the boss is going to be and what their powers are going to be.
Yeah.
So I don't really see this thing as being valuable. What I think is interesting, and the difference between the last time they did the charter amendment, is last time they said they'll have this new department of whatever, public safety or whatever it is, and we may have a police force. This time they said we shall have a police force. So may, kind of was confusing to people because they thought, well, maybe they
We may or may not.
Well, and then they said, well, maybe we really are going to get rid of the police. This time they're not even fooling around with that.
No,
Now they're
no.
like, oh no, we're not getting rid of the police. We're just going to be the boss of them instead. And we do a crappy job with being a boss of everything else. So why don't we be crappy bosses for the police too?
So I don't want people watching this to feel so disempowered that we're doomed to have these pacified charter amendments show up and yada yada yada. What can people do right now
There are
to
100
change
things.
things?
Yeah, let me tell you something. I do not feel disempowered, and I hope
Okay.
no one else does. These people report to us, these public officials. Back when they ran 3 years ago,
Yeah.
they all had to run on a platform of police accountability.
Yeah.
The problem is as soon as they got in, they didn't keep their word.
Yeah, I've
So
seen that
now we
happen.
got to hold their asses to the fire. Excuse my language. That's probably
good.
not the right word for recording.
Hey, come as you are. This is
Yeah,
fine. This is fine.
But the bottom line is we have to hold them accountable for
Yeah.
the fact that they didn't do what they said they were going to do.
Yeah.
And we have to, and in my opinion, bring in a whole lot of new people who actually are activists in the community, to replace these folks that
As
don't want to
elected
do
officials.
right. As elected officials who will do right, because they're not doing right and we need to make them move on. If you're not going to vote to actually hold police accountable and you're not, and your whole thing is you just want to be the boss of them and do a crappy job the same way crappy job the mayor's doing, then move on. The other thing I do want to talk about is this.
Okay.
And so our job is to call them out routinely and talk about this stuff and force them to do the things we want. One of the things, you asked a little bit about the mayor and what's happened since George Floyd was killed. There has been a huge push for what I call the corporatization of police reform and police accountability.
Okay.
The mayor says, right after George Floyd is killed, I'm going to form these work groups, and there's going to be 3 work groups, and one of them's going to be, like system people, like the chief and the county attorney and all that. One of them's going to be, outside experts who we still don't know who the hell any of those people are.
Okay.
And what makes them expert, except that they're corporations largely. And then the third is going to be, that'll be the community work group. Well, first of all, they were going to head the community work group by the Minneapolis Foundation, which has no qualifications, no knowledge, no special expertise around police accountability. The only thing they have is enough money to buy their place at the table, right?
They got a lot of money.
They got a lot of
This
money,
foundation,
plenty
yes.
of money, way too much money, frankly.
Yeah.
But then he never names anybody to this work group.
Yeah.
I have been asking for 8 months, who's on this work group? How were they selected? When do they meet? Are they public? Are the meetings public? Nothing. They keep telling me there's no data responsive to your request over and over and over again. Meaning, in other words, they never named the work group. And then in the meantime, the city wants to bring in this group called Benchmark Analytics to talk about police policy. They hired in Jones Day, which is the 5th largest law firm in the country. And by the way, it's a law firm that took all of the Trump efforts, all the lawsuits that Trump did to try to overturn the election.
Yeah.
They were the law firm that filed those lawsuits.
So we're bringing in the law firm that was dealing with Trump's
Fantasyland,
election fraud
nonsense.
Fantasyland.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So we brought in Jones Day, 5th largest law firm in the country,
Yeah.
who backed him up on his nutty theories, right?
Yeah.
Brought them in to do police accountability when they have no special expertise in this.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be meeting with the, helping the city with the negotiations with the contract and blah, 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 and all this stuff. But yet we have not found one place at the table for anybody in the community. And I mean anybody. I'm not talking about me. I'm not talking about you. I'm not nobody.
Just anybody in the city.
In the community. The sum total of the city's community engagement plan, which they've been talking about for 8 months, the sum total of their engagement plan is a survey that was so poorly advertised that only 7% of the people who've responded to it are from the north side.
Wow.
That is the sum total. they've only had, I don't even know what the number is, but it's not, it's like just a few thousand responses, and only 7% of them came from the north side.
Okay.
So, this is supposed to be the way that the community has input.
Yeah.
It is beyond pathetic.
Yeah.
What they've done. Our organization, as you know, because you played a role in it, our organization held 5 commission hearings. We did the People's George Floyd Commission, held 5 hearings in parks so people could socially distance, fed everybody, captured everything, took written complaints that people wanted to file afterwards. We had a whole open website for people to do that. All of these things, right, to gather information. And we've gathered all this, and we're starting to work on putting a report together and all this. The city in 8 months, and we're all volunteers. Remember, the CUAPB has no paid staff.
Yeah.
This city, with all of its paid staffers, has not figured out how to have one community forum to talk about policing. You know why? Because when they have community forums, they're scared to death of what the community's going to say. They're scared to death that the community will speak truth to power.
Well,
they're scared of us.
Well, maybe we should hold a community forum. I mean, I wouldn't put it beyond people at On-Site Public Media. And when we talk about running for city council and running for mayor, you can go to onsitepublicmedia.com/elections to see everybody who's running in the wards. But the idea of having a community forum, I think, would be absolutely powerful once hopefully vaccines get rolling and people feel safe.
Well, or even do it virtually if you can, with some call-in numbers. The city did last week have this community safety thing.
Yeah.
When you logged in, about 180 people logged in. I was one of them. When you logged in, they immediately muted you. You couldn't speak, only listen.
Yeah.
It was 2 hours of them grinding through PowerPoints.
Yeah.
With lots of fancy arrows and just flows to that and nice graphics and and all that stuff. Didn't say much of anything.
Yeah.
But some of us discovered the chat room, and we started using the living daylights out of that chat room.
Oh, wow.
We started asking questions and all of this, and I asked my same questions. Has the mayor formed this work group for the community?
That he said he was going to form.
Yeah, he said he was going to form. Who's on it?
Yeah.
How are they selected?
Yeah.
Are they meeting? And are their meetings open to the public? I have 5 questions, same questions over and over. I put it up right when the chat room first opened, and they're asking all the questions around it. Then I post it again, and they're asking all the questions around it. Then I post it again. People are saying, hey, why won't you answer her question? We want to know that too.
Yeah.
What happened to the mayor's thing? Everybody's posting all this stuff. We beat them up on that chat room, which was really good because that's the only mean you had, right? Yeah. But it showed that all these people have interest in this stuff, and the city does not want to hear what you have to say. They don't care. So, we kept doing it. Finally, at the very end, I put, for the umpteenth time, and I listed my 5 questions again. Yeah. And then one of the staffers gets on and says, I thought we answered your data request about that. I'll take it up with you offline.
Wow.
This is how much they don't want to talk about any role for the community in police accountability. We have a huge city full of experts.
Yeah.
I'm not saying like just me or whatever. I'm saying we got a lot of experts. Yeah. A lot, and some of the expertise comes from lived experiences.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Why are we not relying on that expertise? Why are we bringing in Jones Day and Benchmark Analytics and Bloomberg? Bloomberg's funding one of the big things.
Bloomberg's funding something?
Yeah, oh yeah.
What are they funding?
They're the funding behind the Office of Performance and Innovation.
Why is
Bloomberg's funding that? I'm trying to think which foundation it is. There's another one, Rockefeller, I think it is, that funds the Office of Resilience or whatever it is. There's all of these kind of corporate players that are funding all of this stuff, and I believe it's funding it to look good but make no actual changes.
Okay.
I truly believe that.
So, we can get into the 2040 plan another day.
Yeah.
But the idea is, and it is this idea, hey, we're promoting dignity, equity, and compassion, and really what's happening is quite the opposite.
If your name is Corporate America, you're probably promoting that. But,
exactly.
But if you're a member of the community, we've been all but shut out of anything to say about our police. And the police are not killing those people. Yeah. Well, they killed Justine Damon, which probably freaked the hell out of these people out, right?
Well, yeah, and that was the only time. I mean, like when you look at a lot of the high profile, not high profile, but the police killings throughout the Twin Cities, That was the first one that I heard where a white person was killed. And there was actually a white person that was
Oh,
just killed.
there's a lot of white people that get killed by police, by the
Yeah,
way.
there was one killed recently in Robbinsdale.
Oh yeah.
it was
No,
Robbinsdale, yeah.
all over the state, a lot of white folks get killed,
Yeah,
frankly. But the reality is that Noah was the very first officer in Minneapolis to ever be prosecuted for the killing of a member of the community. He was only the second person to ever be prosecuted in the state of Minnesota in the history of Minnesota. Yanez. In the Philando Castile killing.
Okay.
Then we had a guy up north named Brian Crook that got prosecuted for killing an EMT who was suicidal. And then now we have the 4 guys in the Chauvin. So this is only the 4th prosecution in the history of the state of Minnesota.
But it's the second in the Minneapolis Police Department.
It's the second in the Minneapolis Police Department.
Okay,
right.
okay.
So it shows you how rare these prosecutions are.
Yeah.
They never happen. And even when they do happen, like in the case of the George Floyd's murderers, they let those cops hang out for over a week. Derek Chauvin got to run down to Florida. They had to bring him back from Florida.
Goodness.
You know what I mean? If cops show up on a scene and somebody's standing there with a gun in their hand and there's a guy laying on the floor with bullet holes or whatever, they're not going to say, okay, well, you go ahead and go home and we'll talk to you later. You know?
Yeah, you're not bound to not.
That's called probable cause.
Yeah.
The video that was created of George Floyd's murder
Yeah.
was probable cause to arrest all 4 of those officers on the scene. They didn't do it. They didn't arrest those officers. In Chauvin's case, I think it was a week, and the other guy's a week and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 8-10 days, something like that. You want to know why the community was pissed off? Because cops get treated like super citizens. Even when they murder someone, they get treated. Even when they murder someone blatantly, on camera, on a video, they get treated like super citizens.
Well, I do want to ask as well, and just to wrap this up, that you're talking about super citizens. Does proposed Charter Amendment 7.3 deal with qualified immunity at all?
Not in the least.
Okay.
Not at all. And that's a huge problem, by the way. We do have a bill at the legislature trying to deal with that.
I've heard about that, but qualified immunity and statute of limitations are like 2 huge things as well that I was really wanting to see something like that in the proposed charter amendment.
And you asked what people can do. There's 100 things people can do.
Yeah, opposed to just running for elected officials.
Which I think is an okay thing to do, right? But it's not to me the most immediate, most important thing to do. And I also kind of I would never run for public office because I really think the system changes you. You don't change the system. I'm kind of in that spot. But that's just my personal belief, right? But there are lots of things. People can find a whole list of them. We have 44 ways to end police violence listed on our website.
Okay.
We have a list of specifically 25 ways specific to the city of Minneapolis that they could be doing right now. What we've got to do as a community is make them do it. The good thing about kind of dealing with the city council, they're not very responsive to the community, but they do tend to be responsive to getting a whole lot of phone calls, people following them around, going to their houses. They don't like it.
Yeah.
Get over it, because you know what? When you treat your house like an office and you don't respond to me any other way, I'm going to come to your house.
I'm going to come to your office,
I'm coming to your office because your house you're treating like an office.
Yeah.
I'm not going to vandalize it, but I'm going to come to it, and maybe I'm going to knock on your door. Maybe I'm going to sit in front of it with a protest sign, whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
But we have a right to expect some kind of communications with our council members. And we have a right to hold them accountable, and we need to hold them accountable.
And lastly, if you were going to write a proposed charter amendment, what are 2 things, the top 2 things you would put in there right off the bat?
That's easy. Great question, and that's an easy one. Number 1, I would end the minimum funding or the minimum staffing requirement for the police.
Yeah.
And number 2, I would transfer the power to discipline police from the mayor to an elected body of community members, specifically formed, like the CPAC, like the community, the community control of police.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do. Is I would have it form a group of community members. 2 from each police precinct, because we have 5 police precincts and 1 at large. So we'd have 11 people on there.
Yeah.
And we would have those people, hire investigators and oversee it, have it be independent of the police department, independent of every other city agency.
Yeah.
They could be their own thing and not, this stupid hybrid OPCR thing that doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
And not only would they investigate, but they would make the decisions about discipline and carry them out.
That would be, can you imagine that? Like 2 community members from each police precinct and having the power to actually follow through on that. I mean, That would be something really, really
Yeah, this is
revolutionary.
something that I sat on the Civilian Review Authority redesign work group back in 2001.
Yeah.
And that was what I brought forward. That was what we recommended, is to bring that forward.
Okay.
We also wanted to do things like set up a situation where different kinds of infractions that were committed by the cops would put points, almost like a driver's license points. And then when you get too many points, you're done.
Okay.
You know, so things like, because we have a lot of repeat offenders in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
We have we have cops with 50 or more complaints on them.
Well, the thing was, when I saw Kyle Mader, I mean, he had 7, and they were all undisciplined. And I
Right,
was like,
of course.
what is the deal here?
Right, well, because, when nothing gets disciplined, everybody goes free, right?
Yeah.
So it's exactly that kind of thing. And so, the reason that, we proposed it that way, I like the idea of having people specifically from police precincts, because the problems in each police precinct are different from each other.
Yes, they are.
We used to have, there was 2 cops back in the old days that would work around Cedar Riverside. They were called Thunder and Lightning. Robert Thunder and the other guy, I can't remember his name, but his nickname was Lightning. So they called these 2 guys Thunder and Lightning. What they would used to do is they used to grab up Somali guys, take them down the river and beat them down there to death and leave them down there to die.
No, was this in the 80s or the 90s?
This was in the 90s.
I definitely ran into these officers then,
Yes.
because I was raised in Longfellow neighborhood and Riverside Plaza.
Then you know.
Yeah.
You know Thunder and Lightning.
Yeah, they also knocked down a bridge that was going over a street because they were tired of people going from one neighborhood to the next. They wanted to keep everything
the
in
neighborhood,
Riverside Plaza. That is insane.
Yeah, we call those crime containment neighborhoods, because what the cops try to do is keep things like they look the other way when people are selling drugs on the north side,
Yeah.
because they don't want them to go to uptown and sell drugs.
Okay.
So they have the police kind of do this sort of uneven policing, because they like the kind of crime containment neighborhood
And as we
concept.
said earlier, they're protecting a certain demographic.
Yes,
in certain,
exactly,
neighborhoods.
exactly.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you're not going to get away with selling drugs right near Calhoun Square or something,
Yeah.
or whatever the hell they call that place now,
Yeah, yeah.
You're not going to get to sell them right in the that area.
Yeah,
but
we'll get away with it in Lyndhurst.
But you go up to you go to 34th and Dowling or whatever, you're going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that being said, how would one, and I know I keep saying we're wrapping up, but you're just a bevy of information, but the last thing you said, if you could get communities into determining discipline and different investigators for each
and creating the
police
standards
precinct,
for what we want from policing.
how would that even be implemented into a charter? Like, the city council would have to give up some of its power.
Oh, most definitely, and so would the mayor.
Okay.
And wouldn't that be wonderful? Could it be written? Absolutely. There's no,
Yeah.
you can write anything in the world you want, right?
Yeah.
The problem would be getting it to happen. We would have to educate people, get people very educated about their rights and their powers. We would have to create a kind of a voting mechanism for that to happen. But look, they did it for the school board, the park board, and everything else. These things are not things that can't be done. They absolutely can be done.
And they just did it in Austin, Texas as well,
That's
where
right.
they defunded the police and put it into houselessness.
Right.
And they actually bought like a whole hotel, and they filled it with
It's
people that
fantastic.
didn't have roofs.
Fantastic. And we got a worse homelessness problem here than they do.
Yeah.
And our weather sucks worse. So
And the mayor was running on the campaign that he was going to end, or he was
Yeah.
going to bring about sustainable, affordable housing. I shouldn't even say sustainable. And so you would have to have a city council and a mayor that are interested in dispersing their power to the community.
Well, that's one
essentially.
way to do it. You also can get things to happen. You can put a charter amendment on the ballot through getting enough signatures.
Oh, wow.
There's like a percentage, like we did that with the police insurance amendment and also with the minimum wage.
Okay.
Is you had to get, the 15 Now program.
Yeah.
Basically, collecting enough signatures, you can get things on the ballot that way.
Wow.
So there are ways to do some of this stuff.
Okay.
They will fight you in court. I mean, that's what happened with why we couldn't get the police insurance amendment on the ballot, because they fought us in court, and the Supreme Court does not follow the law, they follow politics. If they had followed the law and the facts, we would have won. But nonetheless, there's other ways to do these things. And so you can get things on the ballot. And I love the idea of that. I mean, we support the idea of community control of the police, and we're working with TCC4J about it, because we support it.
Well, we'll put the links to TCC4J, CPAC, and for CUAPB below in this video. And again, I can't thank you enough for your time, spirit, and energy on this. And I know we could go on for days about this, and I just think it's extremely important for people to be informed and educated on what's going on, and just know that they have some type of agency going forward.
Right, they have more power than they think they have.
All right. Well,
But the power is collective. Let's all work together.
Yes,
right? This
absolutely.
is how we get things done. Is we put our collective energy together, and that's how we do it.
well, thank you so much for the time, Michelle. I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much.